Okay. So, we have presentations this morning from our esteemed Director of Operations, Mike Saulnier. Mike, would you kindly take the microphone, please? And you have 10 minutes. This this presentation will be concerning the Operations Services branch. And in the interest of accessibility reasons, we will now turn down the lights for the slide presentation. Vice Chair Giberson, please. Thank you.
Through you, Chair Kerr, and member of the committees and visiting councillors, it's my pleasure to basically give you an overview of Operations Services this morning. So on your first slide, basically Operations Services has an equivalent of 132 full-time equivalency. Roads operation is managed by Phil Lyon, which has 57 regular employees and 5 seasonal. Parks and waste operation is managed by Drew Chillingworth, which is 62 full-time, and seasonal we have 50. What's important there when you look at the seasonal aspect is the majority of those 50 are students and obviously coincide with our summer time. And lastly, Fleet Services is managed by Aaron McLeod, who has 13 employees. So roads operation, obviously it's the inspection and maintenance of municipal infrastructure, including all roads, street sweeping, pothole repair, shoulder, boulevard, sidewalks, curbs and bridges, and I'll talk about later about stormwater management, which include the catch basin cleaning, storm sewer repairs, signage for all roads, and winter control operation. We touched on winter control operation. It's basically a monitoring of roads and weather conditions, and these are monitored daily. Salting and plowing of all city roads and sidewalks. I don't want to say all sidewalks, but certainly you guys are familiar with how many sidewalks we do. Windrow clearing for seniors, and facility lot clearing. As you know, we have many facilities, and we assist with that. You know, essentially, roads operation is governed out of 2 depots, the Consolidation Operation Depot and Howden Depot. Howden Depot has 5 employees. And we work collaboratively with Transportation and Engineering Services and the Region of Durham in respect to our roads and keeping everything in a safe working condition. Parks and waste operation is the planning and design and construction, capital park and trail development. The group that does that is 3 employees. We've initially taken an initiative to move them over here to City Hall and to they're sitting with the facilities people because we find that there's synergies between the 2 groups. So essentially that group will be working closely with facility staff and moving things a little quicker that way. Maintenance and improvement to the operation of park facilities, sports field, ball diamonds, playground, dog parks, trail networks, and green spaces. And the maintenance and management of the urban tree canopy. And I'm going to speak a little later on my last slide about the tree canopy in respect to what goes on there. The Admiral Ash Borer response is a very costly response for the city. We spend about $200,000 to $300,000 injecting these trees. These are big, beautiful trees, prominently more in the south end of the city. And the injection has basically slowed down the erosion of the emerald ash borer and given us, I'm going to say, time to cut the ones that actually, because they rot at the bottom and the tree just falls. So we're monitoring that very closely, but we've been very successful at it. And then we have the horticulture group. Basically, we have 3 employees there that look after the growing our flowers and making sure that our gardens and planting maintenance is taken care of. We work with the internal and external event preparation. There's about 50 events that we assist with. And we work collaboratively with internal and external agencies, so development services, corporate services, the BIA, CLOCA. CLOCA is a big one for us. Obviously, anytime that we're near creek beds, we're working with that organization, and they work very well with us, I have to say. Community engagement activities and volunteer programs. And lastly, the curbside waste collection services, and I'll speak briefly at the end about an initiative that we have going on for that, and as well as multi-residential collection contracts. And lastly, we have the, not lastly, policy and research, which supports departmental and branch initiatives through strategic planning, development of policies, standard programs and procedures, researching new and emerging trends, reporting on documenting documentating community engagement initiative. The Monitors Grant opportunity is a big one for us. Essentially, there's a lot of work that goes on to that when we're writing report or submitting approvals, or certainly in respect to getting additional money from the provincial or federal government. Monitoring legislation changes to ensure continuous improvement. As you know, the landscape has changed, especially on the provincial forefront, so we're always monitoring that very closely. And leads and manages special projects such as the tree inventory, the second marsh management plan, which we're excited about the Mclaughlin Bay being given to the city of Oshawa. We're excited about it, but also we realize there'll be some challenges in respect to what has gone on there and what we'll have to undertake as we bring into the operation. And also represents division and branch in various external and different committees and consultation projects. The fleet services, basically responsible for all the assets within the city, with the exception of fire. So maintenance is performed on roughly about 291 assets. When I say assets, they could be lawn cutting equipment to graders and a wide array of assets. And when I look at this group, when you look at 13 employees that basically take care of all the assets in the city, very astounding work that goes on there, and they keep the city in a safe manner. Also important to note, too, in fleet services is that our assets, our commercial assets, do over 800,000 kilometers of travel in the city. So when you look at our plowing activities, whether people are on the road, and basically our CVR is all tied into this. And it's very important for the city because the CVR is monitored in a fashion that if it gets in a risky proposition, we get challenged by the ministry. So we make sure that we have the latest and greatest safety measures on all our assets, and we make sure that that people are up to date and making sure that they're operating in a safe manner. 2019 priorities. This is the biggest slide that I have in the deck, and it's very excited to speak about it. First of all, we have our new work management system and processes. We have 3 of our super users that are working on this committee right now. Where it's important for us to make sure that when we get out of the gate, that it's actually set up in a proper fashion, so there's flow. So we're monitoring our assets, identifying patterns, looking for when we identify the patterns, as what are we doing to plan to make sure that we're taking care of them. So this system, like I say, for us, it'll be very useful, and it'll help the organization overall. The second one I want to talk about is the waste collection boundaries. As you know, there's new boundaries kicking in July 1st. And the reason for that is, I guess about 2 years ago, we started working with the union. And what we've done is we looked at the capacity of the vehicles that we have on our roads. And essentially what we found is that we were under utilizing on the capacity. So what we've done is we went to a 4-day work week in waste, staggered over 5 days. So an individual might have Monday, another individual might have Tuesday, and so on and so forth. By doing this and maximizing the capacity of our waste collection trucks, we're able actually to remove one waste vehicle from the equation, which is a one-time saving of about $330,000 for one waste vehicle. And secondly, we were able to reduce our contractor costs because of the way that we've grown the organization, and we're going to reduce our contractor costs from roughly, I can say, about $30,000 to $50,000 overall. And as well as saving on some of the operating costs for the unit. This is a big initiative, and it's certainly, we've gone through a series of initiatives in waste, but we've done really, really good work in respect to reducing the overall costs there. And what's more impressive is that this is all going on while the city is growing at the same time. So it's a very good initiative. The forestry inventory and tree canopy review, we had a flyover done over the city, and we did this during leaf season, and we want to identify the shape of our current tree assets in the city. And not only did we want to identify it, we want to identify it by risk. So essentially anything that was near a sidewalk, a road, residence, buildings, trails, and park area, we didn't know how bad or how good the city was as far as those trees. The street trees are very good, by the way. We're roughly about 38,000 of those trees. And the street trees weren't really a big issue because most residents, if they see a dead tree in front of their house, they're going to call it in. Where we had challenges was in respect to the woodlots because, as the old saying goes, if a tree falls in the forest, does anybody hear it? We don't know. And essentially, the tree canopy, I would be more than welcome to give everybody a presentation on it. That was a really, really good initiative. And there are two cities that are basically have done it so far that I'm aware of. That's the city of Oshawa and the city of Vaughan. And really, it's moving down that way, and it's certainly easier to do as in respect to putting somebody on the street to going and identifying those trees. It's quite the program. The next one, and we talked about developing the second March management plan. I spoke about the Mclaughlin Bay area. The Mclaughlin Bay certainly is a welcome addition for the city. We don't know what that will represent. It's nice that it was free, but we know there's going to be some costs for maintenance. And from what we understand, there's 3 individuals looking after that trail network that do a very good job. And it'll be interesting as we move forward at what it'll represent for the city and how far we want to expand in developing the second marsh as well. So it's good timing in that respect. Obviously, we talk about support for the city and external events. There's roughly about 50 events that we support that is coming through council that we help out every year. Then we fall into park and trail development projects, including the Harbour Master Plan, which is ongoing right now. A lot of questions have come out in respect to the harbour. We expect to get a good idea of costs for that within the next month as far as what that represents. I'm sure we'll be coming back to council because we are concerned about costs right now. The Stormwater Pond Management Program. That is, we had a good initiative last year. Phil Lyon and his group had grants from the provincial government of about $300,000. And we had 600,000 of federal money that was attributed to it. So we were able to do 50% of the stormwater management ponds that we have. We have 24 in total, so we're still focusing on that as far as cleaning the rest of them going to this year. And the last one is the downtown streetscape implementation. I'm not sure if anybody has seen them. We've put on the new waste receptacle and recycling receptacles are downtown right now. That's phase 1. And as we move along, we'll be coming back to a committee to identify the next phases as we go forward. But this is a big one. I've seen the benches out there as well. It should spruce up the downtown and make it a very nice feature as we go forward there. So, lastly, in respect to the operation, we basically govern ourselves by, our business strategy is very simple. We give the best possible service that we can at the best possible cost. We're very cautious of the taxpayers' money. We're always looking for initiatives. We're always trying to move things forward that way, and we're conscious of that piece there. So, basically, we try to differentiate ourselves and innovate. And I could say there's a lot of municipalities. Lo and behold, it's funny because I was looking at the waste scenario, and the City of London basically made a road trip and came to visit how we were doing our pickups here because they heard that we were one of the better ones that were doing it. And it's impressive when you hear about this because this represents the City of Oshawa. But it's not only there. Guelph has come out and they were looking at the catch basin cleaning in Phil's group, and again, they want to see how come we were capable of maximizing our operation, and I think that we were doubling their productivity in respect to what was going on there. And no different from Fleet. We get a lot of visitors that come and look at our setup in respect to how we manage parts in the city here, and there's always good things going on. We don't have the opportunity to brag about it all the time, but certainly the guys are committed to move the organization forward that way, and very appreciative. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Director Saulnier. We'll now move to turn on the lights. Thank you, Vice Chair Giberson. So, do we have any questions for Director Saulnier? I have Councillor Gray and then Councillor Marks. And before you start, we have 2 additional visiting councillors have joined us today. Councillor Jane Hurst, good morning. Councillor Rosemary McConkey, good morning. Over to you, Councillor Gray.
Thank you very much. Thanks for the presentation. And just with respect to the Mclaughlin Bay Wildlife Reserve, when do you expect that's going to come back and become a city asset?
Through you, Chair Kerr. Essentially, we've set up a meeting. I think we're meeting next week with Development Services to get a better understanding and how quick. We knew something was coming in respect to 2nd March and how everything was going to be coupled together, but we're waiting to see how quick that turnover is going to occur. We're hoping that everything basically coincides with what we're trying to do as far as accomplishing or moving the 2nd March along. So,
Okay, I'm just thinking in terms of brochure. You know, some people like to come into the city and see some of these various assets and the trail system. And I'm just wondering, when are we next doing another brochure update? And if we're going to be doing it soon, can we hold off till we get this new inventory into the system?
Through you, Chair Kerr, essentially the brochure we haven't looked at right now. We were developing in conjunction with the University of tagging some of our parks. The brochure hasn't been on the spotlight yet, so we can delay it to make sure that it includes Mclaughlin Bay there. So
that would be nice, and also the trail system you're planning to do up at the airport. You know, and that way, if we can get it all tied in and then do the brochure, I wouldn't want to see us do a brochure and then, you know, find that really now it's out of date. So we just hold off on that stuff till it's done. I guess we just use the existing ones for now, but just be nice to get it all included into one nice package.
So through you, Chair Kerr, that's a very good point, and we'll take that into consideration. Aside from the stuff that is basically done online, which is simple, but the brochure itself is, if you can invest all kinds of money in there, you should be doing it right. So thank you very much for bringing that up.
Thanks. That's all I had.
Good morning, Mr. Chair. Thank you very much. Mr. Saulnier, thank you very much for your presentation on the operation services. Good to hear morale is good and that everybody's working hard down at that excellent branch of the city. My first question is regarding these wet springs that we're having. What sort of stress does that put on the operations with the water management and the flood management?
So through you, Chair Kerr, essentially for the operation, we're into preparedness. So we work along with fire services. We make sure that we have enough sand and bags to make sure that if there's any event that occurs that way, we monitor it on a daily basis. As you know, we've closed the pier down in respect to the water levels because everything that, you know, basically happens down north, well, makes its way down south. So we've been very fortunate. We've lost certainly a bit of the beach area at the in Lakeview Park, which we'll have to probably get to and enhance again. But it's been very challenging. It's actually more challenging than the snow, believe it or not. It's we have to make sure, like I say, we're making sure taking care of all the assets, and it certainly is a challenge.
Okay, thank you very much. That's good to hear that that we're on top of some of those problems. Tree maintenance, is it for the neighborhood areas more of a reactive approach, like a complaint basis type thing, when someone calls that their tree is sort of overgrown? Because I know, I just to share some personal stories, and I think we spoke about this outside of the meeting. During the campaign, especially in Ward 3 area, and I'm sure some of my colleagues can sympathize with this, along the Central Park corridor of Ward 3, the trees are quite large. People are concerned that should there be another ice storm that crack these large branches and bring them down, it creates a safety issue. Are we taking the approach that if we do anticipate that there will be something like that, should we be scaling these trees back in anticipation of these severe weather patterns? Has that been a thought of Operations Services with regards to tree maintenance?
So through you, Chair Kerr, absolutely, and this is where the flyover is certainly well identifying this, and it's when you're seeing the flyover, you see the actual dead trees, you see the trees that are starting to decline, and the ones that are healthy. The challenge for us, and I'll tell you, it's as soon as the leaves make it on the tree is when it really becomes challenging for us, because as soon as there's high winds and especially the gusts, this is usually where we incur, damage to trees. But we monitor those trees. Yes, we do get a lot of residents who call in and they'll say, "What do you think?" And we'll give them our feedback. And like I say, the individual who's giving the feedback is very qualified and monitors it for the whole city. And we take it very seriously because obviously, in respect to a fallen tree, you can do a lot of damage, right? So, but yeah, we're on top of it. We're monitoring it, and we'll do what's right in respect to the resident there.
Excellent. So the message really is then that you're counting on a good partnership with the residents, keeping an eye on the tree that's on their boulevard. and contacting Operations Services to have a look. And then the collaboration begins on how best to manage the tree moving forward.
So through you, Chair Kerr, absolutely. And like I say, the residents are very quick to point that out to us. And like I say, they will go out there. There's a challenge in respect to how many trees we have in the city and how big our crew is. Obviously, that's why we want to put priorities, is because before we didn't really know where we were going into. Now that we have the aerial imagery, we know where we have to go.
Okay. Yeah, I think if you go into Councillor Neal or Councillor McConkey's ward and sort of look down on the city, you can really get an appreciation for the amount of trees that we do actually are dealing with here in the city. So it is quite nice to see from that standpoint. During the budget, we talked about the situation with the fleet, the automotive fleet, idling with the bylaw officers. Have there been any talk or research on that, on cutting down on the idling, therefore creating stress on the fleet? Has there been any update on that? If not, we can discuss it after.
Well, through you, Chair Kerr, thank you for asking that question.
You're welcome.
We thought we had a solution, and I'll sympathize with my fleet manager, Aaron McLeod, because we had found a vehicle that was a partial electric vehicle. And so when we were talking to the representative out of one of the dealerships, we were told that we'd get it for X amount. When we put the tender out there, we'd done all our homework and diligence and whatnot, and to put a tender together is time-consuming. And the variance between what we were told and where the tender came in, it was a $13,000 variance per vehicle. And we also had to retrofit the COD to basically entertain that discussion and to have this vehicle in place. So essentially, that was we went back to square one and essentially did another tender. And this time, Aaron reached out to the Canada representatives of that specific brand. And it was shocking to me because essentially they told us that they weren't selling that vehicle anymore in Canada. So as much as we put out a tender, I'm telling you, technology on vehicle it moves very quickly.
Okay.
And unbeknownst to us, we didn't know that. And essentially, again, we had to go back to the blueprint and come up with a third plan.
Okay.
So we are looking at it right now. I'm optimistic, cautiously optimistic right now as to the vehicle that we'll be able to get for bylaw, and it should be a suitable vehicle.
Okay, that's great, because I think the concern was looking at the kilometer or the mileage on the certain fleet and then having to replace it at what we considered sort of just from the public standpoint a small kilometer reading was some of the concern with the idling. But it's good to see that it's being addressed again. So that's excellent.
So
go ahead, sir. Yeah.
So just to add on it through Chair Kerr, and I always be cautious because, like I say, the MLE vehicle, when you look at the mileage is not a true picture of that vehicle as far as the usage. And conceptually, you can almost double it. That's how much we use those vehicles. And the previous council that we had put 2 vehicles in abeyance and decided not to replace them. And lo and behold, what happened is we ended up replacing 2 transmissions on those vehicles. And once you start going into that type of expense, when you go to resell that vehicle, we're not making any money. So we have to be very careful in respect to the vehicles that are being brought up.
No, excellent. Yeah, and I think that's just more of an education factor for
Correct.
people that are sort of on the outside looking in
Yes.
when they're looking at things like that. So thank you very much for giving us that. One last question I have is the contracting costs you said have started to drive themselves down. Can you elaborate on that and where we're seeing the savings?
So on the waste forefront, through Chair Kerr, on the waste forefront, we had because we had a growth in certain days, it wasn't the equivalent of one full truck. And the Monday scenario, for example, now we're going to be taking some of the workload that's there and taking it away from the contractor, and on the Thursday as well. So we had 2 odd days that it was very big, and that's why we redid the boundaries to make sure that we could load level to a certain extent there.
Excellent. Okay, thank you very much. Those are my questions, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Mr. Saulnier.
Thank you, Councillor Marks. I now have Councillor Giberson, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and good morning. Good morning, Mike. Really appreciate the presentation. Just a couple of questions that Councillor Marks sort of anticipated with some of his questions. The first one, this one is more of a curiosity on my part that I've always wondered with our waste collection schedule, if there's a holiday one day that week everything gets bumped ahead by a day, or I guess forward by a day, which means that there's waste collection on a Saturday usually. How does that work in terms of the people who are doing the work? Are they getting a holiday in there somewhere, or is it counted elsewhere in terms of their holiday count? How does that work?
So through you, Chair Kerr, essentially the Saturday becomes an optional overtime day every time they get pushed over. We have 12 of those holidays, and along with Remembrance Day, depending where it floats. But yeah, it's all done on overtime.
Okay, thank you. And the emerald ash borer issue, we hear a lot about that, and there was a period of quite intense response and remediation and tree removal. Where is that right now? Like, is it as an issue, is it settling down, or is it just because certain types of trees have now been removed that we're not going to hear about it quite as much?
Through you, Chair Kerr, the emerald ash borers, we're injecting them as it is right now, and we're managing the situation. If we would stop injecting them, we couldn't keep up to how many trees we'd have to cut down. So it's still very present. You look at the tree, though, it's very healthy. Any tree that comes down that basically we've injected, you can see all the green inside the actual tree. So for us, it's more of a management process. So essentially, by injecting them, we're stretching out the lifeline of the tree, and basically they're not all coming down at the same time. Because if somebody asked me, "Can you go and do this tomorrow?" there's no way we'd have enough manpower or money to get this done.
Okay. So it's still very much an ongoing issue then?
Yes.
Okay. I just thought maybe the bugs had just gotten to all of the trees that they liked, and it was...
No.
But apparently it's
So
ongoing.
just to make, through you, Chair Kerr, just to make matters worse, what we're finding is a lot of municipalities have cut down the emerald ash borer, and now it's starting to grow back.
Oh, great. Okay. The last question I had was regarding our fleet. And again, you touched on it briefly there with Councillor Mark's question, but I wanted to take the question about electric vehicles just a step further. Have we ever looked as a municipality at stepping into that new horizon of electric vehicles? And it's still an early phase technology, so obviously we don't want to be the ones pioneering something that might have a lot of wrinkles yet to still iron out, but I'm just wondering what sort of look we've had at it up to this point.
So through you, Chair Kerr, we've looked at this for, I'm going to say, dating back to 5 years ago. When there were provincial grants, we thought that it would be cost neutral to the city. And it wasn't. And keep in mind, too, that electric vehicles are passenger vehicles, and that's not the majority of our fleet. That's number one. Number two now, because the grants are out of the equation, we're looking at bigger grants from federally driven, let's say. And we're always measuring those options, but really for us, in respect to when you look at the kilometers, and when I said there are commercial vehicles put on over 800,000 kilometers, really the commercial vehicles is where you'd want to, essentially focus your process on. But we're always looking for those options. And we want to make sure that we have a solid business case before coming back to council saying, okay, either it's legislated or here it is for the resident, and here it's either cost prohibitive, which it is at the moment, or it becomes cost neutral, and then we have savings. And it's funny, even with the price of gas when you're looking at it, and we're forecasting going into the summer again other increases, so it's not going to get cheaper for the price of gas, even though the city gets a very good discounts on the price. At this moment, we don't have a business case that would support it at this time.
All right. Okay. Is it when you spoke of like federal and provincial grants, are we monitoring those just to, if the right one comes up at some point, we're aware of what's coming through the pipe?
So through you, Chair Kerr, yes, we are. On the latest one that Aaron was doing is the one on the partial electric vehicle. We had somebody who's writing an application for the grant as well. We had to pull it because, like I said, when we heard about the cost, we couldn't go forward with it. But absolutely, if we get grants and there is motivation that way, we would actually, we'd be all over that one.
Okay, good to know. Thanks very much. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Garberson. Any visiting councillors? Councillor McConkey.
Good morning. Apologize for being late. About the 24 storm management ponds, you had indicated half of them have been, how do you describe it? Cleaned out? And can you just elaborate on what cleaning out means? Are you digging down and taking material somewhere?
So through you, Chair Kerr, precisely that's what it is. It's almost like a dredging excursion. We count how many truckloads are taken from the stormwater pond into the landfills.
So that material is going to landfill. It's not going on to, when you say landfill, do you mean like a dump or onto some fields in the ward? Northern ward.
So through your Chair Kerr, no, it doesn't go on a field. It's disposed of through, I'm going to say there's an environmental process to it. It doesn't just, go into a landfill because obviously there'd be leachate involved. So it's processed properly, and like I say, that's governed through a different organization altogether. But a very strict guidance in respect to it.
Okay. So you think there would be some contamination in them when you say leachate?
Well, sorry, through you, Chair Kerr, leachate occurs, it doesn't matter in which landfill, as soon as you have the liquid, because like I say, you're dealing with water, so as soon as you're taking it away and putting it in a landfill, it's spreading to the rest of the items that are in there, so that's why it's monitored probably. I'm going to say it's probably put into some type of storm management plan at a landfill. They do have those, and basically monitoring for what kind of water and what kind of mixture there is.
Okay.
But contaminants, yes, there would be contaminants because it's everything from the streets that's making it to the stormwater management plan.
Okay. So, and of the 24, the majority would be in the north, because I don't think there's too many in the southern wards, are there?
Through you, Chair Kerr, that is accurate.
Okay. And have you ever encountered where you've reconfigured the shape of a pond?
So through you, Chair Kerr, the stormwater management ponds are done through development services. We maintain them, but we don't design them.
In your experience, have you ever encountered one where you were maintaining it and then it was reconfigured just to do something different a little bit on the surface?
Through you, Chair Kerr, not to my knowledge.
Okay.
Certainly, if you do have something where it's been done separately somewhere else, we'd be entertaining those discussions.
Microphone, please.
Sorry, about the park's maintenance. Do you assign a baseball diamond field, soccer field, to one individual over the course of the season, or is that sort of rotated among several?
So, through you, Chair Kerr, I'll let Ron
Yes,
speak
we'll
about
go
it.
through the commissioner on this one. Commissioner Diskey.
Yeah, through you, Chair Kerr, allocation of fields is done through Recreation and Culture Services, and that's done through the allocation or the field allocation policy. And so what you're asking is, do certain teams get certain fields or designated to them?
No, groundskeepers.
Groundskeepers.
Sorry.
Through the chair, we have a schedule where we have staff go to do the field maintenance. Field maintenance is separate from the perimeter, so there's different standards, but we do have a schedule and a route that we send teams out to maintain the parks, yes.
The reason I ask, I don't know if you're aware in other municipalities, they actually have, a summer job for one individual manning one park, and there's almost a competition and pride of keeping that particular park excelling over, that sort of thing. I don't know if that's something that would ever be entertained by the city of Oshawa to implement.
We'll go back to the commissioner on this one. Commissioner?
Yeah, through the chair, certain parks we do have permanent staff located at them. For example, Lakeview Park, Alexandra Park. I'm not sure. We don't have anybody at Ritson, right? Lakefront West, excuse me, we have permanent staff delegated to those areas.
Thank you. And just the last question. Since the implementation of the ward system we're back to now this year, have you found it's impacted your assignment of duties or at all, and the number of ways that it might be implemented in your department to alleviate some pressures on some people?
Through you, Chair Kerr, it's, to me, everybody gets treated the same way as far as the fairness, as far as the wards. Where it's been unique now, now I'm getting it straight from different councillors on their priorities, and I'm okay with that. Before, when it was all city at large, you might have 3 councillors who are trying to address the same issue. So there's pros and cons to it, but you know what? At the end of the day, we're here to make sure that you know, make you guys look good as far as to the residents, and we you know, basically answer the residents' concerns. So.
I'm just wondering, though, if there's some way of the fact that the city is divided into 5 wards, that it might have some impact on your department. I don't know if it's something to consider at some point in time. Because if you're identifying a certain number of complaints, say about snow removal on sidewalks coming more from one area, probably not, that's not a good example because I think they come from across the city. But in terms of that, just marking where the concerns and complaints are coming from, and then, you know, ward by ward, and then, you know, having a conversation with the representatives that's ward and seeing how things can maybe be alleviated. Just an idea I had. If you thought it was worth pursuing, I don't know. Thank you.
So, through you, Chair Kerr, our city is divided by quadrants. So, yes, it can easily be done where we identify in the quadrants, for example, that are tied into Ward 5 or Ward 2 and so on and so forth. That is possible. We'll know in respect to how many complaints and what the patrol individuals is looking in those specific quadrants. No different than sidewalk inspection, because we can't do the whole city in 1 year. We go by those quadrants and do it accordingly.
Thank you. Those are my questions.
Thank you. I just have a few questions to wrap this up, but just start with a comment and a compliment, and through you, Commissioner Jiske, to the Director and Drew Chillingworth. Recently, the city had Compost Day, and I understand it was extremely successful. Staff did an awful lot of work to get this ready. There were lineups for people coming in to get free compost. So I just want to say thank you to staff for putting that together. It was very, very well appreciated by the community. When I was down in Australia, I noticed a device they have in stormwater exit pipes where they would put a mesh bag in front of each, and it would be a way to collect plastic bottles, that kind of detritus that gets down into the stormwater system. And I wonder, I sent a video through when I came back about that. I'm just wondering if that is something that we had looked at as a city, if you can stop the detritus at the point rather than getting all through the watercourse system, it might result in a lot less refuse. I just wondered if that's something that we would take a look at.
So through you, Chair Kerr, essentially, I believe it was Councillor Gray who had forwarded that video. We had discussions with a company out of Markham to take a look at an outfall, and the cost of it was in the range of about $30,000. It was much more expensive than what I thought. So we looked at it. I'm expecting a report shortly from the supervisor who had the discussion with the individual. And then there was not only just the cost of that, and how do we handle as far as the volume from retrieving that net afterwards. So we're looking at it, and I expect a report on that shortly.
Okay, thank you. Next piece I had was to do with Mclaughlin Bay. I noted quite a few years ago there was a proposal come forward to build an environmental center and down in that area, and it never went forward. It was about a $5 million project. But now that it's city land, if an outside agency were to rejuvenate that proposal, have the involvement of Trent University, which has an environmental program, Ontario Tech, which has a water quality program, perhaps even Durham College. If something were to be rejuvenated, now that the city owns the land, is that something that the city could go forward with, or at least examine in terms of opening up that area to school trips, people that wanted to have a look at that center right there in Mclaughlin Bay?
So through you, Chair Kerr, that's a very good question. I think that, when we're looking at the second marsh management plan, I think those things can be incorporated. Of course, we'd have to plan for it in the 2020 budget moving forward, but that's a very good question.
Okay.
We'll keep that into consideration.
Consider, look
Yep.
at. And I guess the last thing I wanted to say was I was really impressed by your report and the number of ways that staff have found to reduce costs. And I think that's really important for the taxpayer to know, not just at budget time, but throughout the year, and for them to hear what staff's ongoing efforts are. So just a big thank you through the Commissioner to you and staff for your ongoing efforts to keep the taxpayer in mind. Thank you very much for your presentation today.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. I think that wraps things up. Thank you for your presentation, Director Saulnier.